Welcome to Career Tools. This week, Stupid Resume Mistakes, Chapter 1. The questions this cast answers are, what kind of stupid resume mistakes do we see, and how do you fix them? Our public conferences during November are in San Diego, Jersey City, and at the opposite end of the world, Melbourne, Australia. If you want your managers to get more out of their directs, or if you as a manager want to get more out of your directs, the secret is the Effective Manager Conference. Find out how one-on-ones, feedback, coaching, and delegation can change your management life and the results your team gets. In this cast, we are going to describe some very stupid, you can't believe it happens kind of stupid mistakes that people make on resumes. And you think maybe nobody does this, or they do. And then you think, well, maybe it's because they're young and, they've only been in the workforce a year, so they're doing their best with their resume. It's not that either. So all of these examples came out of me doing research on Indeed for a software engineer, a software developer to come and work at Manager Tools. And we need someone who's been working for 5 years, and we're going to pay them up to $100,000. So all of these candidates fall roughly into that bucket. So they're not young, they're not inexperienced, and they're not, being paid nothing. They're being paid a decent salary. So they shouldn't be making silly mistakes. And I started taking screenshots of bits of resumes because I could see all these mistakes. And what breaks my heart, and this is the reason I even started with Career Tools, is it breaks my heart that these people are probably really good candidates. They're probably people who deserve a job, who could really contribute to somewhere, and they don't know the mistakes they're making. And that just really, really breaks my heart. And what I wanted to do was just email all of them. Every time I saw one, I was like, hey, you need to fix this on your resume. Hey, you need to fix this on your resume. Which I looked at 200 resumes one afternoon. That would have taken me a while, so I couldn't do it. So instead, we're doing a podcast.
Yeah.
So what are we going to cover?
We're going to cover errors and dates. We're going to cover spelling mistakes, no accomplishments, which is a big one. Oh, goodness. A list of skills, not using the space you have, and letting websites format for you. Let's start with errors and dates.
So a third of the people that they passed the resume screening and we phone screened them, or we Zoom screened them actually, had an error in the dates on their resume. And you think, how do people do that? It's just numbers, you just check them. Well, it is an easy mistake to make in the sense that you can't spell check a number. The spell check doesn't know what number it should be. But it is an indication that you're not paying attention to detail, and that your best work, this is the work that you're putting forward as, this is the level at which I work, and it's not perfect. Apparently, the best you can do is not the best.
And that's going to be a thread throughout a lot of this cast, right? Is you can't bill yourself, and every candidate bills themselves as someone who is attentive to details, detail-oriented. You want to, all of that stuff. And most of the mistakes that we're talking about here are details, are those things that you would associate with, paying attention and putting your best foot forward. And so especially, this is why I thought this was such a great timing and great topic for this cast, because when we're talking about a software developer, right, these are people that are writing code.
Yes, which has to be perfect.
Yeah, individual characters have to be perfect. And what an interesting, just maybe ironic, set of events that there are little keystrokes or errors or mistakes in a resume for someone who's trying to, I think, sell themselves as someone who pays attention to every single character that they type on a keyboard.
Absolutely. I hadn't thought of that, but that is absolutely true. And the worst thing about this for me is you start interviewing someone and you look at the dates and you think, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. And then you say, is this right? That this can't be right that you were doing these two jobs simultaneously, or it can't be right that there's a gap of 5 years here or whatever. And then you can see it on the candidate's face of this, like, they have this sinking feeling in it, like, oh gosh, let the ground open up and let me in, because I know that's not right. And now I've just been called out on it. And as an interviewer, you can't not call them out on it. You have to ask to clarify the situation, to make sure that you know, they're not breaking Wendy's prison rule, which is, if it doesn't say it on your resume, you were in prison. So you have to ask as an interviewer, but you can see it on their face that they're like, oh my gosh, oh, what would that I could fix that right now. And then you ask them another question about something else entirely, and you can see on their face they're still thinking about that date thing. And because they're thinking about the date thing, they're not answering the question that you've just asked them well. And the whole thing goes downhill from there. And so it's not just about nitpicky date stuff. It's about how you perform in the interview, because someone is going to ask you about those nitpicky details.
Absolutely. Any good interviewer is going to ask you about those details. And any good position, a position with a good salary working in a great organization, is going to have a good screening system and good people in the way of you getting into that job. And so, yeah, it's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah,
if you make those little mistakes.
So sad. So we are going to attach to the podcast page of this podcast on the website the examples, which are redacted, but you can still see them. But the one I pulled out here for this example is just someone whose resume starts from the first job is 2005 to 2006, and then the next one is 2008. Well, it's very unlikely that they spent 2 years out of the workforce in that period, because the crash didn't happen till 2008, and there wasn't any education to fill that gap. So it wasn't that they were at college or doing something else. And so it's probably a mistake. And, you know, I can't do anything about it.
And what's interesting is, if you're a developer, or at least I think the limited, interactions I've had with looking at developer resumes, is you could have some, unique scenarios, some, gig work that you do and you list it on there, or maybe you're doing freelance stuff. I mean, there could be dates that overlap. It's not a perfect succession of dates, which is even more of a reason to pay attention and be able to articulate those differences or those overlaps or those gaps. Yeah.
Another one where you often see gaps is on military resumes. There's often a gap where they can't tell you what they were doing. And again, but those people have an explanation, an immediate explanation. No, that's not a mistake. I was doing something. I can't tell you what that was.
Yeah.
But yeah. So here's some ways to look at your resume after you've finished it, or look at the submission you've put on a website and try and find those mistakes. So one thing...
Wait a minute, Wendy. Wait a minute. We're going to give actionable guidance. We're going to tell people what to do.
We are. What? We're not going to laugh at people. We're going to help them, and we're going to tell them how to do it.
Yeah, we want to help people. For those of you that don't listen often, that's what we do. We try to help. We want to give you stuff to do. We want to tell you what to do to be helpful.
So when you add a new job to your resume, make sure that you change the one that says present from the last time to the end date of that job. The number of resumes where the date error is more than one job that says present is probably 50% of them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's so easy to miss because you're adding something in there and then you forget to go back. You just assume, kind of.
And the other way to do it is when you're still in that role, instead of using present, if you're interviewing in September 22, write September 22 rather than writing present, because then at least there's a date there.
Yeah, that's true.
Sometimes that works. The other way to do this is to strip out everything on your resume apart from the admin line. So the admin line says the date, the company, the job title. And if you strip everything away, sometimes it makes it clearer. It helps your eye see because it's not distracted by the numbers. Or you can ask a friend or someone else, not a friend, even a child in your house. Look at these dates. Just look at the dates and make sure they make sense for me. If you give someone a resume, they will give you advice, which you don't need. So you have to give them a specific instruction. Please just look at the dates and make sure they make sense.
I love this. I remember the first time I listened to the Resume podcast, and I think it was said in there, have someone review just looking for errors, right? Just spelling mistakes, just syntax or grammar stuff. And that was big. I remember I used to hand my resume or tell friends, colleagues to say, look at my resume. What do you think? And you leave it so open-ended that sometimes I'd get people say, you should do, and they would say, start with a clean canvas and well, that's not really what I'm looking for, right? Giving them very particular things to look for is, I think, better. I think I'd rather have 4 or 5 people look at my resume looking for specific things because I know their strengths and what they're good at looking at or looking for. So much better than just saying, here, take a look at this. Tell me what you think.
Yeah, and getting 5 different opinions and then still not knowing what to do.
Exactly.
Nightmare.
So the next one is spelling mistakes. And glaring spelling errors in the middle of documents, you would think in an ideal world are caught by spell check, but they're not, apparently. Example in our example set, example number 1 shows the word decision spelled incorrectly in a manner that would be caught by spell check.
You would think, right?
You would think. Other errors that are just really, really kind of stick in your craw because they are real words, right? But you didn't spell them correctly, and so it's not going to catch them because it is a real word. Like, for example, in all the resumes that you've reviewed, how many project mangers?
Oh, there are a lot of project mangers out there.
Right?
There are
so many.
Really a lot of people who are manging products. And it's a word. Unless you're in the clergy, I feel like it's a word you could remove. Here's a secret. You can't actually remove words from spell check. You can tell the spell check dictionary that word does not exist. And so unless you're in the clergy and you need to use the word manger on a semi-regular basis, you can just remove that from spell check and then it will throw up an error when you type manger. I don't think anybody knows that secret, but it is a secret.
No, I don't think so either. Maybe there's a chance that you're working on your resume in multiple different editing software, right? Maybe you're using Word, but then you're using something else on your Mac or whatever, right? Maybe sometimes you work on it on a different computer, and so you're using. And because of that, sometimes we depend on spell check that may be turned off or may not be on in the background. It might not have
the same dictionary.
May not have the same dictionary. Yeah, all this stuff. It's just something to be aware of. And again, going back to that point about how so many people, it's really, really common for someone to put, near the top of their resume, something like detail-oriented. And then 3-4 lines later, there's an error.
And it's just so obvious. They're so close together and... Ugh.
And if what you're looking for is, to put together a resume that gives the person screening it what they need, I mean, you might as well just draw an arrow and say detail-oriented except for this one. And I mean, it's just sad. It's really sad. And the thing about having a resume that contains an error or more than one is when you say things like I'm detail-oriented or I pay attention to details or anything like that, it just cries that there's a discrepancy there.
Exactly.
Right?
One of the ones I saw yesterday that didn't make it into this class because I'd already written it. It's just, I read it and my brain said, that makes sense. And then I had to go back and go, wait a minute, no, it doesn't. It said something like detail-oriented, results-driven, those kind of things. And then it said T-oriented or T-motivated. And my brain said, oh, okay, he's motivated by tea. Excellent. Cups of tea, drive Britain. That makes perfect sense. And my brain said, yes, motivated by tea. Makes sense. And my brain kept going. And then I was like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. And I realized he meant team-oriented or team.
Oh.
But he'd missed out the M and therefore it said T. And it still made sense, sort of.
Oh, my goodness.
And I just giggled because, I feel for that person that they made a mistake. And how many mistakes did I make this morning typing emails? 1 million, but that's not my resume. And sometimes you get something that's humorous.
Yeah, for sure. Like the one that you did include in the cast, which is awesome, which is the person who wrote the resume described themselves as results driven and motivated. And then the second sentence just ends mid-sentence, doesn't finish.
Yeah. So perhaps not motivated enough to keep going.
To finish that sentence. Yeah. So what do we do here?
Okay. So first thing, do not try to write your resume and edit it on the same day. I know we all end up writing resumes for an opportunity that we hear about and we think, oh gosh, I have to update my resume quickly. Try not to do that. And if you can, leave it overnight. Your brain cannot write and edit at the same time. All of these podcasts, when I write them, I put them to one side and I don't look at them again for at least 24 hours. I call it brewing, but it's amazing the next day how many sentences I've written that make no sense. Or errors, typing errors and so on, that you don't see when you're reading it as you write it, because your brain is just not able to do those two different tasks at the same time.
Absolutely. And this, I think, points to a larger theme of all of our resume guidance, which is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? And Wendy kind of alluded to this. You ought not be writing your resume for that job opportunity and trying to post it in an hour, right? We have better guidance for you on that so that you're prepared for things like this.
Next one, ask a friend who is good at spelling, not just any random friend, but someone who can actually spell, to review your resume, looking only for the spelling and grammar errors. So that's the same kind of advice as we gave on numbers. Like, give them specifically, I need you to find the spelling errors.
Yeah. I really like the next one, which is to use a text-to-speech tool, which when I first was putting together my resume early on in my career, there weren't a lot of those available, especially not for free. And now they're ubiquitous. You can just put something in Google.
Text-to-speech tool on Google, and there'll be 100 of them.
It's so great to just listen through to it and say, does it make sense? Or do they garble a word and you go, oh yeah, I had an extra, I there or something.
All of the newsletters and 3 Random Things when I write them, I don't do it for podcasts, but newsletters and 3 Random Things, I always use text-to-speech tool to edit them.
Yeah.
Read your resume backwards. If you start at the bottom and read up, because you're not reading in the same flow, your brain sometimes sees errors that it wouldn't normally. It sees the words that don't fit.
We've all seen those things on like social media where it says, oh, if you can read this,
yes.
and it's not real letters or words, because our brains put it together for us. Your brain does the same thing, especially if you wrote it. So reading backwards, one word at a time, huge, big help.
Yeah, throws you out. The other thing is putting it in a different color ink or making it white text on black screen. Again, it just throws your brain enough that it may pick out the errors that you don't normally see.
Yeah, that's great. So the next thing we're going to cover here is no accomplishments. And this is a big one. For those of you who maybe haven't listened to some of our other guidance, an accomplishment is a description of something you did in your role and how well you did it. Not just a responsibility or something you straight from your job description or something you did that was just normal course of the work. An example of an accomplishment would be achieved $1 million sales of product X in fiscal year 10, right? By targeting high net worth individuals. That one line gives you something that you did, what did you do, and how well you did it.
And if the standard were that every bulleted item on a resume was an accomplishment, if that was the normal standard, which is our normal standard,
correct,
we'd be very disappointed when we looked at resumes because hardly anybody does that. If we even lower the standard to every resume has to have at least one accomplishment, we'd still be disappointed. Like literally, probably 5% of resumes have accomplishments on them, which, considering how persuasive they are in terms of hiring managers wanting to talk to you, is just heartbreaking. Again, it's like, look, people, you did things well. Please tell me about them so that I can talk to you.
Yeah.
And we've got 4 examples and we'll work from best to worst, but please don't think that best actually means there are accomplishments on the resume, because there are not.
Yeah. So the author of Accomplishments Example 1, which again, these are attached on the podcast page, has clearly copied their job description into their resume. This tells us what they were, I guess, supposed to be doing, would you say?
Yeah. But not whether or not they did it. But
did you do it?
Yes. Did they do it well? Who knows?
Right.
I mean, for one, it says, prepares monthly money report and, instead of at, the end of every month. So not only did they copy and paste, they copied and pasted an error. But, okay, so did you actually prepare that at the end of every month? Was it correct? I have no idea whether or not you even did that task, let alone whether or not you did it well.
Right, exactly.
So example 2 has just 3 lines of description. And it uses the word various twice. So one of them is, contract was to update the front end of various clients' websites. So you had a contract. You're describing what the contract asked you to do, but it doesn't tell me whether or not you did it, whether or not you did it well, what kind of websites there were, how many of them there were, whether you delivered on time, on budget. There's a million questions about that sentence that I have that allow me to know the quality of your work, and none of it is there.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this going, what's wrong with the word various? Well, there is a number behind various.
Yes.
Like there's a number.
Yes. Is it 1 or 150 or 1,050?
And that's helpful.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
And if you're thinking, well, then, I want them to think it was more. That's dishonest. Just tell them the number, right? I mean, I remember interviewing with, I can't remember, maybe it was Mark. And I said, well, we saved this amount of money, but, that's not a whole lot. And he goes, yeah, but in the scope of what you were doing, right? If you only had $100,000 budget and you saved $10,000, that's a 10% savings. That's a big deal. You didn't have $1 million budget. If you had $1 million budget, then 10% would be even more of a gross dollar figure. But you worked with what you had,
Yes. And for what I'm doing, I don't need someone to have looked at 1,000 websites. Like 25 would be absolutely fine. So there's no point in hiding it.
Yeah. Okay, so example number 3, this is a good one, Wendy. This one is just a list of technologies. They're not even sentences. It's just, here are these things. Like, for example, Drupal, HTML5, right? They're just technologies.
Yeah, I read a bunch of resumes. Twig and Laravel. These are very popular. I could just put those on my resume. I have no idea what they are. I just saw them a lot. But yeah, literally, I have no words to describe how useless this is to me. And this person is saying, I can do PHP. Okay, great.
Right.
And how well do you do it? What do you do it for? How many websites? How many hits do they get? What's the scope of what you're doing? There's just nothing to cling on to answer any of my questions.
Yeah. But here's the best. This is the kicker.
This is my favorite.
Example number 4. If you were listening to this and you were thinking, oh, okay, this is pretty bad. There's no way it could get worse, right? Well, the senior software engineer resume had the entire job description and accomplishments set was one single sentence that said, I have worked as a senior software engineer in this company.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to I am not laughing at someone. I am just laughing because just you can't not, basically. Yeah. And the idea that I feel like this person put this resume up there as a joke, as a test, as a I'll do this now and I'll come back to it later, as something that, like, it's a placeholder. It can't possibly be that's their resume. As a senior person, like someone who is leading a team, please, please, please let that be a placeholder. And if you had any idea that's what was on your resume, please change it. Because that's awful. Because literally, I would guess from that sentence that he was fired. Because, you can't assume anything else.
Right. Exactly. I mean, it would be the equivalent of if we're looking for someone who is coding or doing things for the website, it would be the equivalent of write some code to have the website do this thing and then just inputting the words generic code.
Yes.
And just,
Yeah.
it's not going to work.
It's not. So, what to do if you find yourself without any accomplishments, or to prevent finding yourself without any accomplishments? The first thing to do is keep a record of what you do at work and how well you do it. And there is an entire class called a career management document, which tells you how to record or how often to record, what to record. And you end up with this document that's, 8, 9, 10 pages long that has every single thing you've done at work and how well you did it. And then when you do your resume, you get to choose from those 10 pages the best ones, which means you'll have 10 accomplishments per job probably. And look at the difference between that and what we're saying is out there. That at least 50% of the resumes on Indeed are like these 4 examples. Probably 5% have real accomplishments on them. If you're in that 5%, you are just unbelievably far ahead than someone else.
Yeah, the difference is staggering between having a career management document where when an opportunity presents itself, you can just parse from this document into one page a resume that is already screened, or you've already looked through it for spell checking, syntax, grammar, all of that stuff. The accomplishments are the way you want them worded. You're not thinking about it in the moment. What's the best way to word that? They're real, they're yours, they've happened over time. You captured them when they were fresh in your mind. They had just happened within the last quarter. You're not trying to go back 11 years and go, I did something around this. And then they're going to ask about it in an interview. And you're going to go, I think maybe it was right. No.
Yeah. Think about how you can measure the results of the work you do, whether the company measures that or not, and keep note of those metrics. Let's say I manage our customer service queue for Manager Tools. Mm-hmm. I don't anymore, but I used to. Manager Tools doesn't take Mark, Mike, Kate, Sarah, any of the other people, the rest of Manager Tools. None of those individuals manage how long does it take me to answer any of the queries. Because as long as nobody's complaining, it's probably about the right time. That doesn't stop me measuring myself against a 24-hour turnaround, if that's what I think is reasonable, and keeping note of that. I never have to tell anybody at Manager Tools that that's what I'm doing, but I can put it on my resume. So just because your company isn't measuring it doesn't mean you can't set your own standard and then measure yourself against that standard.
Absolutely. Great point. And when you're creating your resume and thinking about the jobs you are putting on there, the jobs you've done, think to yourself and ask yourself constantly, what did I do? And how well did I do it? Because that is what the person you're interviewing with, the person who's looking at your resume, the person who is going to make the decision of hire or don't hire this person, that's what they want to know.
Exactly. And listen to the Career Management Document podcast. There's a podcast called Accomplishment Examples, where we went through a whole bunch of examples so that you can hear how they're supposed to sound, and then you can create your own. If there was a secret that Career Tools had that we could tell you, a secret to a successful career that most people don't know, it would be relationships. The investment that you make in relationships at work is what changes by an order of magnitude the results you can get. And the way we teach that is our Effective Communicator Conference. If you are an organization that has a multitude of managers working in matrices or working with clients, working in complicated areas, and you need better results, then the answer is better relationships. We can come to you and teach 30 people at a time how to communicate more effectively and improve their relationships and therefore improve your results. So why wouldn't you want that? Come to managertools.com and look for the For Organizations tab to find out more.
The next thing we're going to cover is a list of skills. So having understood what an accomplishment is, you may be able to guess why a list of skills is not helpful on a resume. knowing that a potential employee has the skill of, let's take from that list that was earlier, HTML5. That doesn't tell the hiring manager anything. What level is the skill? Can they apply that skill in certain circumstances? When they use that skill, what are the outcomes? Did we meet the desired outcome? Were they good, excellent, over and beyond, right?
I mean, I can do HTML5. I can do ahref for a link. I can do B for bold. That's probably it, actually. But I could say I can do HTML5.
Yep, that's true. It's absolutely true.
And the example that we pulled out, like, it might fool you because there are actually full sentences on this thing. And it looks like there's something there, but there isn't. Because one of the sentences says, used Drupal 7.x8, including custom content types, features, and extensive module development. And it sounds like, oh, they've described some of the things they've done. Like, so we're doing better, right? Well, we are doing better. But how does it answer the question, what did you do and how well did you do it? It doesn't. Well, it doesn't say what kind of features I was developing, how many people were using them, how complicated were they? What was the value to the customer or the company? Why was I doing this work? And none of it says, I did it and it worked 100% of the time, or we had 99.999% uptime, or whatever the measure of those things is. It's not there. So does it answer that question? No, it doesn't.
Right. If anyone's listening to this and thinking, well, but shouldn't my resume be the headlines and not the story? And shouldn't I be getting it isn't the purpose of, well, let me just spoil this if nobody knows this. The purpose of a resume is to get an interview, right? Is to get in and get to the hiring manager. But if you're thinking that, that's okay. That's a good thought process. And you have to understand that what we're sharing with you are not even headlines. It would be the equivalent of a headline that says, man lives.
Exactly.
Well, I don't understand what that means. Is this a story about where he lives? Is this a story about how he was, near death and now is alive?
Is it a single man or is it humankind?
Yeah. What are we talking about? A little bit more specificity here.
Yes, exactly. So, how not to fall into this trap? Keep a list of the skills you learn. The things that you use at work, if you're a technologist and you have this list of HTML and Drupal and all those things that you're using, keep that list. But don't transfer the list directly to your resume. And when you write the list, or as you add to the list, include when you used it and how you used it and why you used it and what the outcome was. Think about the whole project, and why you chose that technology, for example, is a really important question for a hiring manager to know. Oh, you chose Drupal over WordPress. What made you make that decision? That's a really interesting question. And you won't remember unless you've written it down. 10 years later, you won't remember.
Yeah. I think I heard someone say this once. Skills are meaningless until you have to use them, right?
Exactly.
Until you put them into practice, until you do something. I mean, you can have a skill, but until you have the opportunity and demonstrate that skill, right? It's not truly a skill.
It's like the British TV show Top Gear, the motoring show.
Okay.
And they did a test where they had been using a driving game that was driving around a particular circuit, a computer game.
Like a simulator.
Yeah,
game.
exactly. So they've been practicing this particular circuit with using the computer game, and then they went and actually drove the circuit to see if those skills transferred, and they didn't, which is probably, you could probably have guessed that. So they had skills, but they couldn't actually use them.
Yeah. I have a golf simulator in my garage. I am so good on that thing. Then I go out on the course, terrible.
Yeah, there's wind.
So it doesn't translate.
No,
it's different.
Yeah. Okay, so the next one is not using the space you have. So the majority of these examples came from the Indeed website, which, if you don't know Indeed, it's one of the big job board aggregators. And in some cases, we downloaded the actual resume, but in most cases, we didn't, because you don't need to. But it was really clear that what was on the page was not a letter-sized piece of paper that was full or an A4-sized piece of paper that was full. In the example that we've pulled out and put in the example thing, in the example package, the only thing I blanked out were the company names. And you can tell that that does not fit one A4 size, a one letter-sized piece of paper. If you put that on a letter-sized piece of paper, it probably might fill the top 2 inches. I counted the words. There are 63 words, which is twice through the Pledge of Allegiance. There's no way that you can use 63 words to describe a 31-year career, which is what this person had.
Wow.
If you can, that's a really bad sign.
Yeah.
And people say, oh, recruiters only spend 2 seconds. Like, how can Wendy read 200 resumes in an afternoon? Well, when they're this long, I take one look at it and I go, it's 63 words. Nope, done.
Yeah.
And it's so unfair because, again, this person has a 30-year career. They're probably really good at what they do, but they haven't told me that. And so they are dismissed in seconds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what do we do?
So we already talked about the career management document. Keep the document. The more you have on it, the more raw material you have to pull out for your resume. And if you have a lot of raw material, you don't have this problem of not being able to fill a page.
Yeah, that's a great point. The other thing I love about the career management document is if you want to get an idea for spacing, I mean, I can't tell you how many people send me resumes, or I've seen resumes where it's 2 pages, which I'm already is like nails on a chalkboard. And then I see 1 line on the next page.
Yes.
And I'm like, this isn't even 2 pages. This is a 1-page resume. You just, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Just one little thing.
Yeah.
But the career management document helps as you are moving things over. You can visualize space and understand, okay, this is this long over here in this document. If I move it over, this is how much space it's going to take up. So helpful for putting stuff together.
And actually printing your resume. So you print it and then you discover what the hiring manager is going to discover, which is it's 2 pages, but it's 1 page and a line. Or it looks like a page on the computer, but it's actually only, 5/8 or 6/8 or something of the page. A lot of people say to me, I don't have a printer, which kind of blows my mind. But maybe that's because I work from home. But if you don't have a printer, then you can send it to Staples or Office Max and have them print it. It's like 5 cents or something for 1 copy. But printing it makes a really big difference with editing. Having something printed helps you with editing, but it also helps you with this whole space thing and knowing hiring managers print resumes out because they need to scribble on them and they need to add their thoughts. It's a physical thing. I worked in several offices doing recruitment who said, we're going to go for the paperless office, and nobody ever did because we just like printing resumes. And if they're going to print it, you should print it first so you know what it looks like.
Right, absolutely. And if you have 10 or more years in the workforce, you should be struggling to fit everything on 1 page, and you should have to cut accomplishments out that you are really proud of because you have to discern what's pertinent for that job and what's going to be the best illustration of what you've done and how it translates to this job. So if you can fit everything on there and you have plenty of white space, you are not starting with enough raw material.
So last one, letting websites format your resume. So if a website insists on formatting your resume for you, at least check what it looks like afterwards. And remember, again, your resume is your example of your very best work. So formatting, the example 1 that we put in the package, it shows the header paragraph of a resume, and the first part of the first sentence, I assume it was there at some stage, but it's been cut off. And then the line breaks are in the wrong place. And so it just looks a mess. And the resume is someone who is a creative, who creates things and therefore has an interest in how things look and are perceived by other people.
Mm-hmm.
And they're apparently telling the world that actually they're not very good at that because they're letting something go out into the world that doesn't look good.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even the fancy PDF resumes that, have been styled and then you just add your details can let you down. So when printed, the white on black section of the resume that's in formatting example 2, it's black with white typing on, but the typing is very narrow. And so when it's printed out, you can barely read it. And the rest of the resume was the same. It wasn't all black on white, but it was gray on white, or there was like a shade background. And it looked really pretty from a distance, but you couldn't read it. And the whole point is, can you read it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't tell you how many times, Wendy, I refer people to our resume guidance and they come back and they say, gosh, but like the template you guys recommend or the format you guys recommend just seems so bland or doesn't stand out or it's boring or whatever. And I go, yeah, but a lot more companies are going to this auto formatting, you know, you download or you upload it and then it formats it. And I'll tell you, the more creative and fancy and clever you get with your resume, with all these different, you know, margins or doing columns or doing, you know, page breaks and stuff like that, the more it's likely that your formatting is going to be screwed up when it's auto formatted.
And sadly, even using a PDF, which a PDF is supposed to go through a system and come out the other side looking perfect. But what happens is the PDF goes in and they don't process it as one document. It gets the optical character reading, OCR. It like reads all the words, and then sometimes it gets the words wrong because it's not very good at that. And so a PDF actually makes things worse because the OCRs are not good enough to read the words, and then you end up with something where, again, the recruiter is having to read through it and make assumptions or make judgments on what did that mean and why is all that stuff screwed up. And if there isn't a compelling reason to go back and actually open the PDF and look at it, they're not going to do it.
No. And that reminds me of like if some people really are like, I want to use a very unique font so I stand out and stuff. Yeah. But then what happens? These auto formatting things, they don't have the matching font. And so your really cool font is now Wingdings.
Yes.
And it's just, you know, these random characters. And you go, no, that's not what I wanted.
No, that didn't help.
I'm not going to get a call back with that.
No. So what to do? Format your resume as simply as possible, using no more than bold and underlining to make the sections stand out. The more formatting your resume has, the worse it's going to look when it's gone through the system. And if you don't believe us, please go look on Indeed at some of those resumes because they look terrible.
And don't try to upload PDFs. Right? We just talked about that. Don't try to upload PDFs and expect that they're going to come out the way that you have that PDF looking.
Check what your resume or your profile looks like after it's been input. And then make changes to make sure it's readable. So if you can't see, like on LinkedIn, you can go and it says, show me my profile as other people see it. I can't remember what the actual words are, but you can look at it. If the system doesn't have that, then somehow create another profile so that you can go look at your own profile. Because how it looks to you when you've uploaded it is not necessarily how it looks to the person who's searching.
And if you are listening to all of this and saying, all this seems like it would take a lot of time and I want to get my resume in as soon as possible, that's exactly why we recommend the process we recommend, staying on top of your career management document, being able to quickly put your resume together based on that job opportunity and what's in your career management document so that you can spend the time on this stuff, not, oh, there's a job, let me go back at my resume I used 4 years ago and rewrite my resume based on what's on there now. Instead of doing that, you've already got all that, and now you're just focusing on these things that are going to make you stand out, make that resume stand out.
Yeah, if you've got 24 hours to send in your resume, the idea of spending 24 hours on the fine details rather than the absolute basics, you know, that's what makes you stand out.
Absolutely.
And the instructions on this guidance are so simple that you would think that everyone would be following them without having to be told, which is why we included examples, because I was convinced that if we didn't include examples, no one would believe this to be true. But it is. And having reviewed hundreds of resumes, I can tell you that this list and these examples barely touch the iceberg of the errors that I've seen. This is just the top 5. And we'll be back with more because like I say, it breaks my heart that all these people are not finding the jobs where they could contribute to and make the world a better place. And so we're going to do this again because I want you to know how to not be in this position. And in the meantime, please just make yourself the difference and just eliminate these mistakes.
Yeah. We just talked about making your resume stand out. Even if you're not going to make your resume stand out in the good way, just make it not stand out
in the bad way. Absolutely. Right? I love that. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Wendy.
That's all for this week. We'll be back next week with a new topic.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.